All right, little dudes, let's get started on our practice for Wednesday, which is today, April 15th. I'm calling it Wacky Wednesday because look at my hair. Like a wacky hair day. Not on purpose. Anyway, let's get started on our first story problem. Who loves pie? Me. I know you love pie too. What is your favorite pie? My favorite pie is pecan pie. I really, really, really love the taste of all of the pecans in the pie with a little bit whipped cream on top. Oh man, that sounds so good. Okay, in today's story problem, it is about a person named Pablo who has a pie shop, and Pablo is making some apple pies. So good. Well, Pablo's Pie Shop ordered 128 apples so they can make 8 pies. If each pie uses the same amount of apples, blank apples will go in each pie. Do you think there's going to be more than 128 apples in each pie? Or do you think there's going to be less than 128 apples in each pie? If you were thinking less, amazing work. Pablo's Pie Shop ordered exactly 128 apples for 8 pies. And if Pablo is taking 128 apples and splitting them in to all of the pies, and more specifically, 8 pies, well, there's going to be less than 128 apples in each pie. As always, I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and go to work. Today, I'm actually only going to give you 3 minutes to solve the story problem. We have some juicy questions that we're going to answer in our guided practice, and I also know that some of you can work through this one very quickly. If you solve it once in those 3 minutes that I give you, go ahead and solve it a different way. Go ahead and get to work. Okay, so remember for today's strategy review, compare and contrast. So find what's same and what's different about my strategy and your strategy, and then go ahead and make any edits along the way. So for today, when I review my strategy, I'm actually going to compare and contrast my picture with my number sentences. So that way it'll go by a little bit quicker. And again, we'll have more time for some of our juicy questions at the bottom. Every time we read questions, including if they're just story problems, it's really important to make annotations. So the first annotation that I made is that we had 128 apples, not apples, apples for 8 pies. Each pie uses same amount of apples. So what that means is that we need to take 128 apples and split them up into 8 equal groups. These 8 equal groups represents the 8 pies. I noticed that the question also gave me a series of answer choices. So I also wrote down each of those answer choices. 136, 120, 28, and 16. Now before we get started on the story problem, I can actually eliminate some really silly answer choices. The first one that I thought about eliminating is 120. If Pablo's Pie Shop has 128 apples, and Pablo still needs to split them amongst 8 pies, there cannot be 128 apples in each pie. That's simply too many. I also noticed that 120 was just taking away 8 from 128. And we're not just taking away, we are separating or dividing into, that's right, equal groups. Well, the next answer choice that I can eliminate is 136. There cannot be 136 apples in each pie if Pablo's Pie Shop only ordered 128 apples. That now makes my strategy a little bit easier because now I'm looking for the answers 28 or 16. I first began by drawing 8 circles to represent the pies. You can see I labeled all of the pies at the bottom right. Then I thought about giving each pie an equal number of apples. Well, if I started with 1, that would take me a really long time. Thinking about the work that we started last week and this week, I started off with multiples of 10, specifically just 10. I wrote 10 apples in each pie. Then I wrote a number sentence to match each step so that I wouldn't lose count of all the apples I was putting in each pie. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. 8 pies, 10 apples in each pie has to give me 80 apples. I knew if I were to do it again, that would be 80 plus 80. Well, 80 plus 80 is 160 apples. That's more than the amount of apples that Pablo needed for his pie shop. I chose another number that was greater than 1, but less than 10. I went with 5. 5 is also a friendly number to count by, and it's larger than the number 1. I continued to write a number sentence to match all the apples I put in each pie and all of the apples I had together. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. So 8 pies with 5 apples in each pie gave me 40 more apples. Well, the 80 apples from the first round and then the 40 apples from the second round of apples left me with 120 apples altogether. We only had 8 apples left, so then that way I could then just put 1 apple in each pie. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pies with 1 apple in each pie would result in 8 more apples. So 120 plus 8 made 128. I've now divided up all of the apples into all of the pies. My last step is to simply count the values in the middle of each of my number sentences, or go back to each pie and count the amount in each pie. 10, 15, 16. Looks like that's the same number in every pie. Then when I check my number sentence, it also looks like that is the number that's in the middle. So it looks like Pablo's Pie Shop is going to have 16 apples in each pie. Since we divided 128 apples, the number sentence that matches my work is 128 divided by 8 equals 16. I'm also going to write the multiplication sentence, since I also use multiplication to match my picture. 8 times 16 equals 128. If you got that one correct, go ahead and give yourself a pat on the head. We've been doing backs. I figured we'd move on to a different body part today. Okay, now let's go ahead and type in our answer in the blank space. The answer is, actually, we're not typing it in because we have to choose. We chose that it was 16, which also means that we can have that circled on our paper. Okay, friends, go ahead and organize your scrap piece of paper for question number 2. Okay, now that you've organized your scrap piece of paper for question number 2, go ahead and read that question to yourself independently. Then I will go ahead and read it aloud. Question number 2 says, a candy store has 256 free lollipops to give away before the store closes. Only 8 children come in, and they are given the same amount of lollipops. Which 2 equations could represent the number of lollipops each child was given? Let's go ahead and make some annotations on our scrap piece of paper. The first annotation we should make is how many free lollipops the store is giving away. So for question number 2, right next to it, write 256 lollipops. Well, let's go back and think, who is getting those lollipops? Only 8 children come in, and they are given the same amount of lollipops. So it looks like these 256 lollipops are for 8 children. And they are given the same amount of lollipops. Which 2 equations could represent the number of lollipops each child was given? So the other annotation that we should write is what the question is asking. That's right, what the question is asking. The question is asking us for us to find 2 equations. So let's also write that on our scratch piece of paper. Find, and I'm going to write the word 2 in capital letters. Equations. I wrote 2 in capital letters to remind me that is specifically what I'm looking for. Find 2 equations. Well, since we know that the lollipops are being split into 8 equal groups, and those groups are the 8 children, we already know one number sentence. That's right. That number sentence is 256 divided by 8. Let's use a red letter to represent what we don't know. What do we not know in the story? That's right. We don't know the number of lollipops that each child is getting. So let's write the word or the letter L to represent lollipop. The question is asking us to find two equations. If we think about the work that we just did with Pablo's Pie Shop, we knew that there could be another way that we could write this division number sentence using awesome multiplication. So how could we write this number sentence using multiplication? If you thought that we could write it as 8 times L, which represents lollipops, equals 256, you're correct. The 8 represents each child, and the L represents how many lollipops each of those 8 children will get. Altogether, that should be 256 lollipops. Now let's go ahead and look through our answer choices to specifically find 256 divided by 8, and 8 times blank equals 256. Let's go ahead and read the answer choices carefully. The first one is 256 plus 8 equals C. Would that be correct? No. The next one says 8 times C equals 256. Would that be correct? Of course. Even though the question is using the letter C, it's still in the same place as what we wrote in our number sentence. Are we done? You're right, we are not done. The question asks us to find two equations. So let's find the other equation. The next answer choice is 256 times 8 equals C. Is that correct? No. The fourth answer choice is 256 divided by 8 equals C. Is that one correct? Of course. Nice job. We have found two equations that match the story. Let's just evaluate that last answer choice just to make sure we didn't get tricked. C times 256 equals 8. Now, we know that doesn't make any sense because there's no way our answer could be 8 if we multiplied something by 256. Awesome job, scholars. Let's go ahead and organize our scrap piece of paper for question number 3. This one's going to be our spicy one for the day, so get ready. Okay, question number 3 says, what is the quotient of 1,617 divided by 5? Say the word quotient to yourself 2 times. How many times? That's right, 2 times. Say it to yourself twice. Remember, quotient is the answer to division expressions. Whenever we divide, our result is called that's right, the quotient. When I continue to read question number 3, I notice that it asks for a remainder. What is a remainder again? That's right, leftovers. So when we are solving this problem, we're going to have leftovers. But first, let's go ahead and write it on our scrap piece of paper. We are dividing 1,617 by 5. Since we know that multiplication is the opposite of division, we could think of solving this number sentence as 5 times something gets us to 1,617. So we need to think of what could we multiply 5 by to get us as close to 1,617 as we can. In the other examples, we multiplied by 10. If we multiply by 10, do you think that could get us as close to 1,617 as we can? Well, 5 times 10 equals 50. And I know that's still a pretty far distance from 1,617. So I wonder if we could start with hundreds or multiples of hundreds. What if we started off with 5 times 100? Would that get us as close to 1,617 as we could? You're right. 5 times 100 equals 500. That is much closer to 1,617. So let's start off with that number sentence so that we can continue to get as close to 1,617 as we can when we multiply 5. Could we multiply 5 times 100 again and not go over 1,617? What's that, Katie Badge? I say we could do it again. We know that 500 plus 500 equals 1,000. It's getting us closer, but not quite there. Oh, hello. Little cat paw in there. Let's go ahead and add these two products. 500 plus 500 equals 1,000. We're getting pretty close. Can we do 5 times 100 again? You're right. 5 times 100 is another 500. Now we're at 1,500. We're pretty close. Since we're really close to 1,617, we should now be thinking how much more. We should be thinking, that's right, how much more. If we're at 1,500, how much more to get to 1,617? This might be a little tricky to do in your head, but remember, if you use place value, this should be a little bit easier for you. So we know $1,617 is 117 away from 1,500. Well, if we have 117 left, we could not add another 500. So we have to think of a factor that's smaller than 100. Let's go back to trying tens. If we did 5 times 10, that equals 50. We're at 1,550. We're getting really close. If we do another 5 times 10, that's also another 50. And now we're at 1,600. How much more do we have left to go? That's right, 17. Is 17 a multiple of 5? No. And that is why we're going to have leftovers. So we need to get as close to 17 when we count by fives as much as we can? Well, we know that 15 is a multiple of 5, and that's pretty close to 17. So if we did 5 times 3, we're now at 1,615. Well, we can't go any farther because if we count by fives, that'll be over 1,617. Since we're at 1,615, we know that there are, that's right, 2 left over. In order for us to find the quotient, we need to go ahead and add all of the values that are in the middle. We can write these as number sentence, but I always think it's really easy just to count them. 100, 200, 300, 310, 320, and 323. So it looks like our quotient is 323 with 2 left over. Now when mathematicians write leftovers, they use the letter R to represent, that's right, remainder. So let's go ahead and write the sentence we just solved with our quotient and our remainder. (1,617) divided by 5 equals 323, and we write R to represent remainder of what's left over. The remainder is 2. On your guided practice and your independent practice today, you're actually going to have 2 spaces to put in your answer. So when you go back to your guided practice question, where it says, what is the quotient of 1,617 divided by 5, we're going to type in 323. Then in the second question, when it says remainder, you're just going to type in 2. You don't need to type in R. You can do that for your scrap piece of paper. Amazing job today, scholars. Don't forget to click next here at the bottom so that you can do your independent practices. All of those scholars who complete their independent practice will receive some virtual Vista points, including those who attend office hours. So don't forget, office hours are at 2:30 each and every day. And if you're invited to reteach on Tuesdays or Thursdays, that happens at 1:30 as well. Happy Wednesday, scholars. I will see you tomorrow.